What's up, guys? Welcome back to the World of Code. This is our first actual Python lesson where we will be going over how to actually write some Python code. I'm super excited. I hope you are too. This lesson and the lessons that follow will be for beginners, so don't worry if you don't know much about Python yet. This video is also good to watch if you just want to review and refresh your Python skills, which is always a good thing. There was a video before this on this channel that gave a little bit of background information about Python, and I recommend watching it. Right now, I'm using something called Google Collaboratory, which I'll be using in this tutorial and the future tutorials, and it's basically a software where you can write Python code and run it, and I'm sure you could do other languages as well, but for right now, we're using Python. And I talked about it more in depth in the previous video, and I'll put a few more details in the description box below. But basically, it's completely free. All you need is your Gmail, and there's a lot of cool features on here, giving you the ability to do a lot of cool projects. And I'll put a link to it in the description box below, or you could just search up Google Collaboratory or Google Colab, which is what it's also called. So I want to start this video with a little bit of a heads up. So heads up, writing Python and really any other programming language can be frustrating at times because you could be doing something as small as missing an apostrophe or not having the space where you're supposed to have one, and the computer can't process what you're telling it, and it'll give you an error. And to us humans, that may seem like a very little thing, but to the computer, it cannot understand what you're trying to tell it if you have little problems like that. And obviously, if it can't understand it, it's not going to give you what you want back. And so it's when that happens, I recommend looking over your code a couple times, trying to look for little things like apostrophes, like indentations, parentheses, things like that. And if you still don't find anything after a couple times of looking over your code, then it's probably a bigger problem where you actually have a problem with how your code is written. So I usually look over it again with a bigger picture. So I try to look at the actual code itself and problems that may be there. And if I still can't find anything, I usually go and ask someone that does know whatever programming language I'm working with, and I ask them to proofread my code, which is called pair programming, and a lot of people do it. A lot of scientists who use Python and engineers who use Python and any other programming language do this all the time. And it's just good to have different opinions and perspectives because they could find something you might miss. And so just be patient, stay calm, and I can assure you, you will succeed with your code at the end. So now that we've cleared that up, let's start with the actual lesson itself. Today, we are going to be going over print statements, and variables. And these are things that you use in code basically every time. I use it, everyone probably uses print statements and variables every time they're writing code and they want something with a certain goal in mind. And so let's start with print statements. Print statements are what you use when you want the computer to say something back to you. So the print command is basically you telling the computer, I want you to give whatever information I put in this statement back to me. So let's do a little bit of a visual example. I'm personally a visual learner. Many of you are too, I suppose, I assume. And so let's do some visual learning. And so let's do a space. So you basically do print, parentheses, double quotations, and whatever you want. And so there's a tradition where your first piece of code is hello world, because this is your first time talking to the computer and it talking back to you. So let's do that. Hello world, and let's run the code. The run button for Google Collaboratory is right here. And voila, it does it for you. And so let's look over our command really quick now that we know it works. So we wrote print, which is a command in Python, and when you write it correctly, usually it changes colors. So do you see it turns a brownish color? in Google Collaboratory. And so after that, you just do no space, and then you do a parentheses, and then you do quotations. And in those quotations, you write whatever you want the computer to give back to you. And this right here with the quotations and whatever you want for the computer to give back to you, that's called a string. And it's a string when there's characters, which are these letters here. And so a string is basically like characters, and you just have to have quotations around it, and then you have another parentheses. That's all you need. And so you can actually use single quotes instead of double quotes if you want. And let's run that to see. See, it does the same exact thing. So you can use double quotes and single quotes kind of interchangeably in Python. So it doesn't matter, but you need a matching set. And what I mean by that is you can't have double quotes and a single quote. It's going to give you an error. So you just want to make sure that you have like matching sets for quotes. And usually I use double quotes, but sometimes I use single quotes, and it really doesn't matter. You could do whatever you want. And so this is like the most basic form of a print statement. And as we go further into Python, we will learn new ways to utilize these print statements to do more for us. But for right now, this is the most basic type. And I also wanted to go over how to do print statements with integers. So integers are basically just numbers without decimal points. So it's a whole number. And so let's say we wanted it to print the number 18. And you're probably wondering, but you don't have quotations around that. So how is that going to print for you? Let's try. See, it works. So basically what that means is when you have an integer, you don't need to have quotations around it. And let's say you have like decimals right here. It'll print that for you too. But this is not an integer because it's not a whole number. This in Python is called a float. And strings, floats, and integers are known as data types. And we're going to be going over that more in depth in another video because those are important. And there's different ways to use those. And so you know that. And let's try doing it in quotations to see what happens. See, it prints for you too. Let's see if we have like a float here. Prints for you too. So it doesn't really matter, but you don't need, what I'm trying to say is you don't need quotations for integers and floats. So now that we've gone over basic print statements, let's move on to variables. Variables are like labels for something. In other words, they store values. They're so useful when you're writing any programming language because they're just, well, actually, let's give you an example right now. Let's say you're going to use the phrase hello world a lot in your code, and it's annoying to have to rewrite the word, it's annoying to have to rewrite the phrase hello world so many times over and over again every single time you have to use the phrase. So instead, you can create a short variable that whenever you write like the variable in your code, it just is the same as hello world. So let's give you an example here. So hello world is a greeting. So I want my variable to be called G. Usually I like to go for shorter variables because then like it's just easier and you don't have to like write some huge thing. And then you do a space, and then you do equal to, and another space, and then you write your phrase, which is hello world, right? In this case, right? And so now let's do a print statement. Well, actually, no, let's show you something really quick. So I did the variable is equal to hello world. So let's run that really quick. It doesn't do anything because, as I said before, a print statement is you telling the computer that I want you to give whatever I put in this statement back to me. So if I don't have a print statement, the computer isn't going to be able to, well, it's not going to do anything because it thinks that you don't need anything. So we always need a print statement. So we do print, parentheses, and then you're probably thinking, oh, now we're going to do quotations. No. When you do use a variable, you can never use quotations. So let's do G, which means hello world. And voila. It says hello world. Isn't that so cool? And it's so much easier than having to write hello world so many times over and over again in your code. And like, you're probably wondering, why am I not using quotations around this? So let's see if we use quotations. What is it going to do for us? It does the letter G, because in Python, when you write a print statement and you do parentheses around it, it turns into a string, as we went over before. But the thing about the computer is when you write a string like that, it doesn't process what's in the string. It just automatically prints out this whatever's in those parentheses and in those quotations, and it doesn't care. It can be anything and it'll print for you. But obviously we want it to process what G is so it can write hello world. We don't want the letter G. And so that's the reason why you don't use quotations around hello world. I don't know why I always get mixed up between quotations and parentheses, excuse me. But now you're probably thinking, with just one variable, it's really I guess it's helpful, but it's not that helpful. Actually, you can do more than one variable. So if I wanted to do something else, I wanted to say something let's say my favorite animal is a unicorn, right? I'll say my favorite animal, so A will do, and then I'll do unicorn right here. And maybe I can write favorite animal, unicorn, right? And I can do print G, and then I'll say print A. And again, you don't use quotations around variables. And so you do that, and see, it tells you, and it does it one by one. And so let's try doing a variable that's an integer. Let's see what we do then. So we'll use our favorite number, right? And my favorite number is 32, right? And so you actually don't use quotations around integers. As we did in the print statements before, we didn't use quotations around the numbers. So we can just do 32, and we'll see what happens. Print n. 32. And let's try using quotations. Let's see what happens then. It still prints out for you. Okay? That makes sense? So that's just basic variables. And actually, there is, every time you need the variable in your code, you can use that variable name. So as many times as you want. But there is some criteria for naming your variables. So variable names must start with a letter or an underscore character. So a letter, I think we all know what a letter is, but an underscore character would be this, right? It's underscore. And that also means that it cannot start with a number. And your variable may only contain capital A through capital Z, lowercase a through lowercase c, numbers 0 through 9, and the underscore character. So variables may contain. And so you can't use things like hashtags, like @ symbols, exclamation points. You can't use those in your variables. And also, your variables are case sensitive. And so what that means is, let's say I wanted to do the variable number, right? Number with all lowercase letters, number with all uppercase letters. Oops, I don't know why I did that. Number with all uppercase letters, and number which is the first letter to be uppercase and the rest lowercase. Let's do something really quick. These are all different. So basically what that means is, let's say, we'll give another example of that. Let's say my number is 23. and I do print, and instead of writing all lowercase number, I'm going to write all uppercase. And you might think that's going to give you the same exact thing. Let's do it. It's an error because that's not a variable. So it's case sensitive. Uppercase and lowercase letters matter. And so now let's do a little bit of a problem per se. And so let's do a story. I went to the park and I found some rocks, right? And some of the rocks were magic rocks and some rocks were normal rocks. And so let's do some variables. And I would just want to figure out how many normal rocks I have. And so let's create a variable and ask the computer to solve this problem because I'm tired and I don't want to solve the problem. So I'm going to do the variable found R for found rocks. And I'm going to say I found 40 rocks. That's a lot of rocks. Okay, and we don't need quotations around the integers as we went over before. And then my magic rocks, I actually know how to identify magic rocks. So I know that I have 14 magic rocks, which is pretty good. Every magic rock you get a wish. Okay? Anyways, so we have to find the number of normal rocks we have. And okay, for some of you, this may seem like an easy problem, but it's nice to have the computer solve it for you. And if you have a more complex problem, you can ask the computer to solve it for you so you don't have to solve it. So let's do that. We can literally write, so how would we find how many normal rocks we have? We would say the number of rocks we found minus the number of magic rocks would be equal to the number of normal rocks. Am I right? So we would say that my found rocks minus my magic rocks would be equal to my normal rocks, right? Everyone agrees with me? So let's get the computer to solve for my normal rocks. So I do found rocks, which is my variable 40, minus magic rocks, and I just go, and it gives you the answer, 26. And let's say we don't have a space between all of this. It also gives it to you. But so in this case, it doesn't matter if there's a space between these things. So if there's a space between the minus sign and the found rocks, or if there isn't, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a huge difference. So it's very simple, right? And so what if we just wanted to multiply the found rocks multiplied by magic rocks? So you don't use the X. That's not the correct way to do it. You use the asterisk right here. And that's basically 40 multiplied by 14. So you're probably thinking ooh, I can do all my multiplication on this too. So yeah, you could. And so basically how you get the asterisk, you do the shift with the number 8, which is where the asterisk is. Well, that's a hard word to pronounce. Okay. So you see, and there's a lot of different things you could do. You could do the plus sign, so you could do 40 plus 14. That's 54, right? And you can actually also do divided by, and that's 40 divided by 14. That's really cool too, yeah, and it's super cool, and you can do so many different things. So we have, these are our normal rocks. And so these are basic variables, and using variables, it's really useful in Python, as you can probably see. It's very there's so many different things you could do using variables. I mean, also, if you wanted, you could just do 40 minus 14. But that's going to be I don't want to rewrite everything over and over again. And it's just easy if I just have this. So maybe another time I want to do 40 minus the found rocks minus my normal rocks or something to find my magic rocks. And these numbers can get confusing in our head. And if we just have the computer already know the numbers for us, it's just easier for us. And so there's many ways you can use variables, and they're super useful, as you can probably already tell. And so that's the end of our lesson, which is basic variables. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of new concepts that add on to this, and we'll be going over that in the future videos. So for right now, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Turn on post notifications so you never miss a video also. And before, in the previous video, we had a question of the video, and the comments were unfortunately turned off, so I'll try my best to get them turned on this video. So we're going to do the same question as the last video, which is if you were to name a programming language, what would you name it? And the reason for the question is the reason for the question is in the previous video, so definitely watch that if you want to know why. And so thank you for watching. We have changed the days we're going to upload to just Sundays. So our next video will be next Sunday, and there might be some videos in between, but those aren't official videos. And so oops, there's a mistake here. But our next lesson will be on Sunday. And in the comments, let us know if you have specific tutorials about Python that you want for us to go over, and also let us know if there's any cool projects that you want us to cover, and I would love to hear that. And so thank you for watching, and bye.